Hello everyone, this is B. Harper from supermarcy.com and welcome back to another review. In honour of Crimson Peak, directed by Guillermo del Toro, who is my husband, but he doesn't actually know it yet, I've decided to review some of his previous films. Guillermo del Toro to me is one of the best directors working today. He has just an incredible vision for every one of his projects. Now, granted, his earlier films such as Mimic didn't necessarily live up to, his standards, and in fact Mimic left him with a very sour taste in his mouth when it came to Hollywood at the time. But it was all part of his building blocks. Mimic wasn't his first film by any stretch of the imagination. That was actually Cronos, which I have previously reviewed in the 90s horror month from last year, so I'll put a link down here so you can have a read of it. It's a pretty good movie, but today I'm going to be looking at The Devil's Backbone. This was perhaps the first film by Del Toro that I saw that I really just took an interest in him. As I said, he has such a startling, visionary talent, and he also knows how to tell different types of stories. He's like, I'm not going to say that he's childish, but he has the capacity of conjuring up all these fantastical and wonderful worlds and characters and still being able to put them down on the screen in a fully comprehensive fashion. And to me, The Devil's Backbone is a consummate masterpiece. It's not often you get yourself a really good ghost story, and truth be told, I've discussed this with another friend of mine. There's not a lot of really quality ghost stories being made today, and The Devil's Backbone kind of set the bar for something like that. It's not strictly a horror, it has so much more going for it. It is a drama, it is a romance, it is a fantasy. Every one of Del Toro's films has those elements in them, in varying degrees of course, but to me The Devil's Backbone, more than anything else, is a love story, and allow me to explain to you why. So, a lot of Del Toro's work centres around the human element, and in this film you have several instances of love taking place. You have a platonic love between some of the boys at the orphanage, and you have the elderly couple, the man of which is impotent. The other one, the woman, she's actually involved with a loveless affair with a much younger, much more virile worker at the orphanage. And one of the major themes about this movie is, if you feel love for somebody, don't not say anything, basically, if you can understand that. If you feel that you have a connection with somebody, don't let it go, don't let it just let sleeping dogs lie. If you feel there is a connection, if you feel that this person feels the same way about you, don't feel any hesitation, because you never know if you're going to die tomorrow or not. And that's another great theme about The Devil's Backbone. It is all about mortality. Yes, it has a ghost in it, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. But mortality is something we all have. We're only here for a very limited amount of time on the earth, and we have to make sure that we make every single minute count. That's easier said than done, but what you have to keep in mind is that there's only so much that fate and destiny can dictate for you. And whether or not you believe in these things, that is completely up to you. But one thing is for certain is that we live, or rather we are born, we live, and we die. The most important part of those three stages is living. It's not merely enough to exist. It is enough, you gotta go out there. You have to go out and experience who you are and who other people are, and correlate all these things together so you can say at the end of your life, I am happy with what I have done. I am happy with my accomplishments. I'm so overjoyed that I have met these people and I have learned from them and they have learned from me, and we've been able to stay together for the rest of our lives. And you can see me sort of tearing up a bit when I say this, and that's because The Devil's Backbone had a huge effect on me. And I'm not a cold hard bitch, please don't get me wrong, but it really takes something special, a special film with a special message to really bring those emotions out of me. And The Devil's Backbone does that so well. So a few other key ideas here is that you know, we have to take responsibility for our actions, yes, and we start that when we are children. And the kids in this movie, Del Toro has always had the mind that children are far more sensitive to the world around them, and they just don't get enough credit for it. No, they don't necessarily understand the harder truths that we come to realize as we get older, but there is some sort of innate awareness in them. And when it comes to the lead character, you know, child who comes into contact with the ghost boy, he doesn't react necessarily out of fear. He's more curious about this kid. And although the ghost child has a very sort of horrific appearance, like when you first see it, and the movie is so great at building up the suspense factor, but finally, when you feast your eyes on this departed soul that has left the earth under very suspicious circumstances, you don't feel fear, you feel pity, and that's what this boy feels. He feels compelled to help this child. He doesn't see the ghost kid as a freak or an abomination or anything like that. He just sees like a kindred spirit, and that is such a beautiful way of examining a ghost story. The way I figure ghosts to be is like a video playback. They have unfinished business on the earth, and they can't do anything until they're given leave to move on. And since they are no longer living, they are not in charge of their own destinies anymore, it is like an eternal curse. And it is really, really sad when you think about that. So a little bit more on the themes before I go into the more sort of nitty-gritty with the supernatural stuff. Compassion and love and thankfulness. And yeah, I already touched on that, but it's nice to be nice, and it's kind to be kind. And if it's coming from a genuine place, it helps make your life far more fulfilled. It gives you a great appreciation of the people of which you share the earth with, living or dead. Alright, so that being said, this whole film, for the first 2 acts, it is a relentless supernatural thriller with those dramatic elements. But what it also does really well is that it establishes the human characters. By that I mean the living human characters. Because this film wouldn't have been as powerful or meaty if it didn't have really compelling and interesting characters. You may not necessarily like some of them, but they are given a reason to be. And that's what all good stories need to have. They need to have characters that have a sense and purpose of being in the story. There's nothing worse than having a completely thankless character in an otherwise really strong tale, because it makes you question why they're here. You know, they're unnecessary, and therefore you don't care. In this movie, you do care about them, but how you feel towards them, whether or not they're good or bad, it is completely left up to your discretion. And a lot of this film is hugely image-based. It is all about establishing atmosphere. This film mainly takes place in a boys' orphanage during the Franco-Spanish Wars. I could be wrong in that, World War II or something like that. I'm sorry, I do not know my history. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that this film is taking place during a war, and everybody is a victim in a war, and especially children. And since it's taking place in an orphanage, they don't have their parents, they don't have their own sort of personal anchor in this world, so they rely on each other, that the boys relying on each other as well as their caretakers. Now, most of their caretakers, you know, mean nothing but the best for these boys, but this war is having a strain on them personally. And there's a real sense of oppression in this orphanage. It can be quite brutal on a lot of the boys, whether it be physically or emotionally. But it's also because they're in the middle of a desolated country. They're mainly cut off from the rest of the world outside. This orphanage is their universe. It is their own little microcosm, and they don't have very many, if no, sort of a capacity to sort of like branch out and see the world for what it is. It's just, And yeah, Del Toro has a huge thing with showing, you know, fetuses in jars, and The Devil's Backbone actually takes its title from one such image of an unborn child, a fetus inside of a jar, and the child's backbone is on the outside of the skin, and it is just a really startling effect here. I think it's trying to commentate on, you know, how life can be uncompleted, how it can be cut short prematurely due to whatever factor. And the ghost child also stands for this. In a sense, well, here's a bit of a spoiler, he was murdered, okay? He was forcibly taken from the world unjustly and without any sort of consideration for who he is as a person. And all he wants to do is to be let free, and that's why he is beseeching the boys of the orphanage to help him, because he doesn't have the power to escape. And yeah, it is such a dramatic and almost draining movie, but it is just so compelling. The imagery, the acting, the themes, it all comes together just so beautifully, and I am so glad I saw this film, because the way I figure it, as I said, there's not enough good ghost stories happening. Like, most of the time you get stuff like Platinum Dunes or, you know, Dark Castle Pictures, and a lot of their ghostly entities are malicious, and it's always just like same old with them. But with The Devil's Backbone, despite all the supernatural elements, despite the grotesqueness of how this boy looks, he is still a person, and this film is all about the people. It is not about the world beyond, even though there is a slight contemplation about that. A great sort of tagline in the movie is, what is a ghost? And yeah, what is a ghost? Like, is it, you know, does it have a human element? Is it completely supernatural? I don't know, you don't know. But all we do know is what we see, and what we see may not necessarily be the truth. I'm not sure if you understood that. Quite frankly, I don't know if I understood that. But the fact of the matter is, The Devil's Backbone is a meditation on life, of human life, of the people, of how we live the time that we are given on this world. It's just, it is a beautiful movie. It can be downright depressing at times, but there's a sense of optimism about that, and it comes from the fact that these are young people before their world is shattered by the hard truths of humanity. They still have a sense of hope about them. Their parents have been taken from them, they've been tossed into a frightening and unfamiliar environment, but there's still a sense of camaraderie around them. No matter where you are in life, there's something for you to hang on to. And it's frightening, and it makes you angry to begin with, but when you don't give up, that's when your true resilience comes through. That is when you know that you can still be in this world. You can do more than exist. You can live. And that, my friends, is The Devil's Backbone. And that was a very terrible segue. But in all honesty, Devil's Backbone, 4.5 out of 5. Brilliant. So thank you guys, and as usual, I shall see you again in the next video. Bye bye for now.